Welcome to Operation Freedom TV show, a program dedicated to American veterans and their stories. Our sponsor, American Legion Post 10, VFW Post 7589, and Vietnam Veterans America, Chapter 617. I'm your host, Brad Bradshaw. Today we're pleased to have with us Bob Cope. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you.
Bob is a Navy veteran and a neighbor. And he's a Cold War veteran and a Vietnam-era veteran. He is married, has 2 adult sons, and is a grandfather.
That's correct.
Got a grandson. Correct. Bob was born in Oberlin, Ohio, and grew up in Wellington, Ohio. He graduated from Wellington High School in 1967, an important time as the Vietnam War was raging. Bob's classmates were killed in Vietnam, including his friend and football teammate, Tim Cattell, who lined up beside him playing football. Bob, you had a National Science Foundation project, and I was fascinated reading about it. You were a junior in college.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't in ROTC, so you got to do other things during the summer, and you had this summer program in your junior year, and it was this Professor Snyder of Oxford College. Is that Oxford, England?
Yeah, England, yes.
England, okay. Tell us about that program and Dr. Einstein.
Well, it's part of the National Science Foundation undergraduate research program. There's grants that are given for undergraduates to assist in these various projects. And Dr. Snyder had this grant that he was doing to study the gravitational redshift that Einstein predicted. Back in those days, in about 39 or 29 even, Eddington had gone down to South America and tried to confirm Einstein's predictions by looking at an eclipse and watching this light of a star bending around a planet. But you have to continue to confirm these tests. That was one of the first, and it wasn't that accurate, they felt. So this atomic beam method was developed, and there was one experiment before Dr. Snyder's. But we had a potassium beam that was measuring the sun's light, potassium light coming out of the sun and going through the gravitational differences between the sun's gravitational well and the Earth's. And we captured it with a solar telescope and made measurements, very fine, 10 to the minus 9th picoamps that we were measuring. And we confirmed, another confirmation that Einstein had it right with the... but the thing that Professor Snyder is noted for, and you can look it up in Physical Review Letters, is we discovered an oscillation in the photosphere, a 5-minute oscillation in the photosphere, which had been understood to be calm, but in fact it wasn't. So that was the discovery.
I'll be
that
there.
we made as well.
So nobody even written about that. So
no, well, the current thinking was it's it's stable, and we can use the light out of there for our experiment. And we said, well, what if it isn't? We better check. And it was, for sure enough, it was oscillating. So we had to account for that.
Okay. So once you knew about it, you could the quality of your product was perfect.
Yeah, 16.4 milliangstroms. That's what Einstein thought.
All right. So, but you went on to graduate from, you were on scholarship at Ohio Wesleyan University in '71 and major in physics.
That's right.
And how did you pick up the Navy? What made you decide to come in the Navy?
Well, I've been very excited about flying since I was 15. I took my first flight lesson, and out of a farmer's field, we had to buzz the field to get the cows off the narrow strip. So. But I was always interested in flying and thinking about being a Navy pilot. But I was also accepted to a number of graduate schools and a PhD program. So I wasn't going to be drafted, but I didn't want to miss the war or the flying.
Right.
So I applied. So that's a decision, when you're young, you're making decisions that affect the whole rest of your life.
Absolutely.
And that was a big one, and I'll never regret the way I went.
Good. So you came in Navy as a candidate for officer. You came in enlisted, but you went to officers candidates.
OCS. AOCS. Aviation Officer Candidate School.
Okay.
Down in Pensacola.
And Pensacola, and I'm fascinated who gave you the training. Who gave you the training?
Well, they turn you over to the Marine drill instructors. They take the best drill instructors they have, and the first batch goes to to Quantico, and the second batch they sent down to Pensacola.
Wow.
So we really got our money's worth. They turned us over to Marine Staff Sergeant, and they don't do that today. But I wouldn't want to do it again, but I wouldn't want to.
And he was fresh from Vietnam.
He was back from Vietnam, and I think today he would say he had some post-traumatic stress. I was the class adjutant, and I had to wake him up in the morning. And I learned very quickly to be careful and make sure the desk was between me and the cot.
Oh, yes. So, and you woke him at 4:45?
We woke him at 4:45, and we go out calisthenics at 5 o'clock.
And you had a couple of stories about school. Tell me these were stories that happened to you.
Well, in the morning it's dark, and we go out running around the base there in Pensacola, and the Marine drill instructors calling the cadence. And we were running down the road, and we heard this clang, this big crash, and boots hitting the ground. We looked back, and the staff sergeant's out cold on the ground. He'd run into a Volkswagen. And so we're trying to figure out what to do. So we'll go a couple blocks. We're going to get to the end of the base at some point. So we just kept going. And a couple blocks later, we heard him pick up the cadence again. So he's a tough guy.
He's a tough guy.
We gave him an award when we got our commission.
Good. Tough war. Okay, and you were marching one time, and you have these ramps that where seaplanes used to come up and down.
Yeah, he would march us out on the seawall. And in World War II, they used to pull the seaplanes up the ramps. They didn't use them at that time. Right. But he would play a little chicken with us. He'd march us down the ramp and do to the rear arch before we got into the water. And he missed it by about 2 steps once. And so I'm in the front. There's the 3 of us, and then we have the guide in front of me. Right. So Arnie, with the flag, starts sliding down the ramp. So I turn, I throw my rifle to Busky, grab his belt, and grab Arnie by the belt. And by this time, the whole rest of the column's turned and gone the other way. And so there we are, trying to get organized again. The staff sergeant sees what we're doing, and we got some comments, but we got back in line. So.
Good. Okay, and that was 3 weeks long, and after that you go to the what you want to do, the flying. Tell us about the flying.
Well, you don't get into flying until you go through rigorous ground training and a battalion and a lot more training before you get to softly.
That's academic, in other words,
academic training and so forth. Yeah. Okay. But then we get to softly, and it's pretty interesting there. That's where you solo for the first time, and it's interesting that how there's for each runway they had you took off on the first half and you landed on the last half, so it was pretty busy. And the landing pattern was real busy too, because we had a 1,200-foot pattern, and the T-34s came in at 1,200 feet, dropped down to 700 feet, and set up for their landing. And the T-28s were coming in 500 feet doing carrier brakes.
Jeez.
So you really kept an eye on your altimeter, because you could be 200-foot difference between a T-28 coming in broadside.
Oh yes, and
kept you on your toes.
And you've been selected to fly helicopter. You had auto-rotating. In other words, you fix wings, a basic training, and you go to helicopters.
Well, then fortunately you can't do that. You don't do it these days. But we went to T-28s next. 1,500 horsepower fighter bomber used in counterinsurgency in Vietnam, and we got instrument training and formation training, and just a tremendous time. You could stand it on the prop for the first 10,000 feet.
Gee, I know.
That was an awesome airplane.
So,
but then I went on to helicopters,
right?
And H-57s, and then Hueys.
Okay. And was it Huey you got your final check, and they do emergency procedure on you, and they do it at any time. You got to be prepared. This is on your check ride.
Yeah.
They did an emergency on you. How to auto rotate. Explain that.
Well, as you were saying, you do a check ride, and when you get into the pattern, then you have your check ride. Except I was with a Marine captain who was really pushing the envelope, and we hadn't gotten into the pattern yet. The pattern is splitting the field. There's helicopters. As you're splitting the field, you're looking at helicopters coming this way, and they're down on the ground working, and they're coming this way. And you're not in the pattern until you split the field and go left or right. So he says you got an emergency. He bottomed the collective. And so this is a full auto rotation, and it would be my last one until a real one. You don't do any more after that. They're full. So just to make sure that I knew that he wasn't going to help me, he put his feet underneath the rudders. So it's important, of course, to pull a collective exactly right to set it down safely, but it's also you don't want any drift either way, or you've got a chance of rolling the helicopter, which is really, and the instructor's usually, safety on that.
Oh, yeah.
So he's back like this with his feet under the rudders, and I'm coming down into traffic, and that was my last auto rotation. So I'm here, so it worked.
Obviously successful. Great training. Okay.
Yeah.
So your first operational assignment was flying H-53s in the Philippines and the Vietnam War theater.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
I had fortunately gotten one of, I think, 2 fleet seats that week when I selected. And so I volunteered for HM-12, which was it was moving on to sweep the mines. Haiphong Harbor and the rivers.
Right.
So we were sitting in the Philippine Islands waiting over 72, 73 over the Christmas bombing and so forth, waiting for them to get back to the peace table, which we did convince them to get back to the table.
Yeah.
But I thought I had an interesting first flight, one of the first flights in the 53. I was getting a FAM flight with the commander, and Mount Pinatubo hadn't blown yet, so he took us over to Mount Pinatubo and started flying around the crater's rim.
Yeah.
And he started sliding down the crater, and at one point you can't cut it any tighter, so he started pulling collective, showing me how you could actually suck yourself tighter through a turn with the collective. So we had full power. We got almost down to the bottom, just over the palm trees, and out from nowhere came this village, thatched huts. And we went shooting over that thing, and I looked back, and the thatched huts were up about as high as we were. So apparently we had destroyed the hut, and the roof was up as high as we were. And we were just, we hoped we didn't kill anybody, but he pulled back on the stick, and we shot out of Mount Pinatubo like a rocket shot.
Gee. That'll really get your interest there.
And that was interesting.
Yes. So you were, in 3 months later, you were expecting to, of course, sitting there, the height of the air war is 72 and 73. You were expecting to go over, and then you developed some medical problems. Yeah,
I had actually developed a medical problem flying T-28s. And I went to the flight surgeons trying to figure out what was going on. They said, we're not sure, but you probably shouldn't be flying. And so that was the wrong answer. I figured, well, when I got my wings, then I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But of course I didn't. I got 8 days after I got to Norfolk, we were on the C-5s and over in the Philippine Islands. So it got worse. And finally they sent me back to the hospital in Balboa. And at that time I was getting into a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And never flew again.
That was it. So then they worked almost a year, and so you reassigned to. I mean, you mentioned personal transformation during that time because you were under a lot of pain, and before you went into a staff job, in other words, they put you into another discipline.
Yeah, when you're under a lot of pain, a lot of stress in your life, it can transform your life, and it did in my case. One of my classmates from AOC checked me out of Balboa Hospital, and he explained to me how I could have eternal life if I accepted the free gift of eternal life from Jesus Christ. And I did that. And, the bottom line is, Ephesians sort of sums it up, that for it is by grace that you are saved through faith. It's not of yourselves, it's not of works, but by grace. And so we have to accept that. And then it goes on to say that God has works for us to walk in. And so it transformed my life to today.
So you were able to come out of that because you were successful in the next, you spent 6 years in service, so they got hold of the physical stuff, and you were under treatment for a year, but that you got through that, and you signed to AIRLANT and worked with Lieutenant Delaney. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was a short period at Airlant, and Lieutenant Delaney was special assistant to Admiral Michaelis for recruiting and retention. That was a time when we were trying to bring in all volunteer forces. And this guy was just the most he's just down-to-earth guy. He had us move help him move one day. So we were over in his house, and I noticed this stack of medals. He had a distinct flying cross. He had 37 air medals. He had Vietnam country medals.
Right.
And 700 combat missions with HAL-3. And, I mean, he didn't talk about it. People around him didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
Just he became an admiral.
Yeah.
And today, I think he's on the board of Wounded Warriors.
Good.
But what a guy.
Yeah.
But he helped me along, and then I went on to become a computer instructor for combat systems.
You were in an early cutting edge of computers, because at the time I don't remember even having computers in that age, because I was in the service at the same time, and you became a computer instructor. Tell us about that. That's fascinating. You were on the cutting edge.
Yeah, well, I was a computer instructor for the Navy, and we were doing real-time computer programming as well. So, and that was the cutting edge of computer technology in those days. In the 70s.
Yes.
And so that when I got out, I did the same, I kept working in the field and working with giants in the government and in the Navy.
Yeah.
But at that time, the Navy was kind of World War II in terms of its IT technology on the ship.
Oh, yeah.
Tactical data links were there, but computers were sending all kinds of data and intelligence printed from computers, but printed out on teletypes. So we helped the guys on the 1052, where they had one guy reading the teletype over sound-powered phones, and two guys standing behind the grease board writing backwards.
Like World War II.
Yeah.
People all remember behind that, they're writing it backwards, so the guy on the other side of this board could read it. Yeah. Now you can project it. Tell how they use it now.
Well, you know, we developed interfaces to the tactical systems, to the intelligence systems, and put decision aids on it, large screen displays, and one example, we had one on Commander Vern Clark's McCloy destroyer, and he told about the time where he had a sonar contact. We had sonar information coming in too, and we also had predictions of what the sonar, what the noise would do. And he's looking up at his display, large screen. He says, "Come right." And then he looked up at the display and he saw, well, he looked at the predictions. If he went right, there'd be a time when he would go out of contact as prediction. So he said, hold that, come left. And he saw that at this point he wouldn't lose contact. And so that's an example of decision aids that brought things together on the 1052. Now, I think Vern Clark was about our 27th CNO, so he went on to be CNO.
Yeah, you talk about predictions. Talk about the Russian Bear. The Russian Bear is a four-engine aircraft. Tell them about the Russian Bear.
Well, yeah, another. We went on all classes of ships, traveled all over the world. We developed software, prototype software, put it on the ships, and went with it. And we were on the Vinson during its maiden voyage, and they were asking us about if we could do a decision aid to help them with the Bear, because as the Bear came over doing over-the-horizon targeting, it was a scramble to make sure he had a F-4 in tow.
And he's a Russian.
And he's a Russian, yeah. So we did a decision aid. We had all the data, so we said, well, this is when you launch the E-2, this is when you launch the tanker, and this is when you launch your intercept. And
so you optimized your time to be there, which is
fabulous. We were actually,
advance.
It was great to have a floating platform that we could develop as well as test.
Good, good. And let's see, you were in Desert Storm. You were involved in Desert Storm, and of course, you were working the civilian side as a contractor, but you're still working the Navy all this time, right up to today.
Yeah.
And you were in Desert Storm.
Well, I was in the Gulf of Sidra line of death. Remember when Gaddafi was drawing a line of death there across the Gulf of Sidra?
Yes.
He was involved in hijackings and with Hezbollah, and it was a mistake to draw a line in the ocean with the American Navy around. And so they threw together a battle group very quickly, forestall battle group, and charged across the line. Well, what they didn't tell us is what they were going to do, but they said, we wanted your system aboard the forestall. So our system was on the forestall. We were in the war room.
And you were on board.
And I was on board, and my partner. And it took us a little while to figure out what was happening, but we're in the war room, so we couldn't miss it. we were surrounded by Russians,
Uh-huh.
and as we crossed that desert, that line of death, the Russians got out of there, and then all the airfields, all 5 airfields, lit up, and they came after us.
Uh-huh.
And every Libyan Russian aircraft had a F-4 in tow, so they peeled off.
They said an F-4, by the way.
Yeah,
Fighter.
in those days it was just F-4s. And but we were there watching the Asa boats, among other things, and those are PT-like boats with cruise missiles that could sink a destroyer. So we saw them get underway, and of course, we're reading the intel data and plotting it.
Right.
And so I tore off the picture, handed it to the staff officer, intel officer, who took it to the admiral. And then I waited for the manual teletype to come out of the intel spaces. And never happened. Never came out. It's on the floor somewhere.
Couldn't do it.
But the chips were just so overwhelmed with data
Right.
coming in. It really wasn't possible.
And that's
to keep
what
up
the
with it all.
computer does, brings it all together and makes it translate so you can understand.
Yeah, today we do all this stuff.
All that stuff. Yeah.
But then it was new.
Yeah. And you also work with hardware, equipment, computers.
Yeah.
Tell about how the Navy went from, they had, for like an aircraft, a Navy aircraft developed from the beginning, it's going to only be a Navy aircraft. Now you're doing something different. You're going, tell about that.
Well, yeah, it was against policy when we were bringing these commercial computers aboard to bring commercial equipment aboard. And so we worked with the giants in the Systems Command and the military, and it worked to the point where it became against policy to not consider commercial equipment before you did military equipment.
Yeah. And you explained to me how tough the commercial equipment is, because you had an example where a piece of naval equipment fell off something and shattered, and the commercial just was okay.
But yeah, commercial equipment, I finally figured it out. You have to ship it around the world.
Right.
It has to hold up.
Has to.
And I was on the Vinson programming, and a F-4 went over Mach 1, and sonic boom, and the computer lifted right off the table. We were right underneath the flight deck. I think I was doing a save to a disk.
Right.
It came back down, and I kept working on it. The military message terminal went into an alert mode. It was screaming. So the tech came over, and he spent the rest of the day working on things.
Trying to work on it.
The computer
Yeah.
just kept going.
Yeah. So they do it all the time. In other words, there's some advanced stuff they go commercial. That's an important transition in the military, and I'm sure all services are doing that now.
Yeah, the R&D, the millions and the billions of R&D that go into our commercial products, we take advantage of it now whenever we can.
Good story. You're doing some homeland security consulting. You have a small firm yourself now.
Yeah, I have a small firm. My oldest son is a partner in it.
Good.
And we're consulting for DOD and DHS, and doing things like smart card and common access card, working in that field. The DOD right now is concerned about consolidating data centers, and you've heard about the cloud. We're doing cloud architecture and service.
Explain the cloud.
Well, the cloud is where it's a little bit like the old days in power. We used to have power generators at our factories.
Right.
Then we came up with a power grid, and now we don't have power. We have power stations supplying the power.
Right.
And we're starting to look at it the same way with computing. The computing is going to be ubiquitous. It's going to be out there on the grid. Of course, we always have to have enough computing power when we get separated from the grid, especially in the military. But everyone needs to worry about that too. So the architecture is cloud, but distributed and consolidating. So it's a tectonic shift in our IT architecture. We won't see a bigger shift in our generation.
Yes. Well, I remember the battleships, they were antiques. They were useful, I guess, in Vietnam, but they were huge, absolutely huge. You won't see them on battleships.
Well, we don't have battleships anymore, but we had them in my day, and we had our systems on the battleships.
Okay.
So, we were able to bring them out of mothballs and put cruise missiles on them and put new technology, and some of our stuff went in.
That's right. It's a huge platform for missiles.
Yeah, it was great.
Good. Now, when they launch a missile on the deck, you couldn't be up on the deck, right? It'd be too much noise or something. How do you do that?
Well, I was never aboard a battleship when I launched
Okay.
a missile, but I was on ships when they launched the SM-2s,
Right.
and boy, that is quite a sight and
Oh,
sound.
yes.
It's just in itself.
Oh, you could watch from the commander's position.
Well, we were out on the bridge, yeah,
Out on the bridge,
watching.
okay.
It might have been a
yeah.
mistake. But.
All right. And, explain, smart card is entry into places, I assume. Tell the folks about the smart card.
Today, the federal government and the DoD uses smart cards for both physical, to enter into buildings,
Right.
but also for cyber, for accessing your computer, logging on to your computer and logging on to sites and so forth. It's we're leading the way in the federal government in that way in identity management.
Good.
We've got a terrible time with identity theft, but this
Yes.
technology could actually take care of it if the
Good.
banks ever bought it.
Well, they should, because it's there's some horror stories there. We won't get into it, but you help a lot of folks. It's pervasive. You're right. You got you got a
Terrible
great
problem.
project to work on, and you can take that smart card and have another use for it. Then.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah. For all your anything that you got to identify yourself too. You
Good.
can use it.
So you're still active and working with the federal government and various agencies and everything. Now we're getting down to about 2 minutes. So I want to talk about something that you do as a volunteer. It's with the aviation part. Tell us about that.
Well, I'm a member of the Commemorative Air Force, the CAF, and the CAF's mission is to keep a flying museum. We have the only some of the only aircraft like Fifi, the bomber, World War II bomber, and P-51s and B-24s and so forth. And we have a hangar, a local chapter out at the National Capital Squadron. And I happen to be the safety officer out there.
Yes.
So we do a lot of things out there with the community. We're working with the first responders, getting ready to do a simulated incident at Culpeper Airport, and working with the first responders.
Neat. So you expand it out. It's great. You talk about the type of aircraft. People can also join it. You might give it a little membership plug.
Oh yeah, you can join the national chapter. Check out the CAF.org. And if you're around here, then you can join the local chapter, and that's us out at National Capital Squadron. So you join the national first, and then join us. And then every second Saturday, we have open hangar day. We'll cook you a hot dog and show you aircraft, maybe get a ride in a warbird.
Yeah.
And every Monday, every first Monday of the month, we have a meeting. And usually a World War II vet or a Vietnam vet tell us their story.
Their story. Yeah, you've been at Manassas Airport. Matter of fact, I flew a B-17. Came visiting you and everything, and that's part of you was sponsoring that. That's good stuff for the National Capital Group. That's good. We're wrapping up the program, and Bob, I want to thank you for being with us today. Thank you for your service to America and the Cold War and the Vietnam era war. And thanks for all your continued service. You've had a long time with the Navy. You get over 40 years now.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it.
You enjoy it. Okay. And thanks to our sponsors, American Legion Post 10, VFW Post 7589, and VBA Chapter 617. This is your host, Brad Bradshaw. Good night to wherever you are.